Welcome to Minority Matters. I'm your host, Sylvester Smith. This month we will be talking about results of the recent election, along with taking a look into the future of Governor Asa Hutchinson's administration. We will also discuss the policies Arkansans can expect to come out of the new GOP-led legislature, and what does the future of both the Democrat and Republican parties' efforts to reach out to minorities look like. There's a lot to get to, so let's get going. Joining me to discuss these topics are Lamar Davis, an attorney, Leon Jones, also an attorney, and Wesley Brown, an independent journalist. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Just as a point of reference, so our audience knows a little bit more about the players, I just want to make it clear that, Lamar, you were Deputy Chief of Staff in the Beebe administration, and you're now a Public Service Commissioner, although your comments today are your own and not the Public Service Commission's. And then, Leon, you are the Director of the Department of Labor, but today you're speaking as a private citizen and not in your official capacity.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for taking time away from what you do to come and chat with us today. So, we had a great conversation, all of us except for Wesley, about the election last fall. And predictions were made. And Lamar, I'll start with you because I believe you predicted a much better outcome for the Democrat Party and their candidates. I unfortunately cannot serve you crow for animal rights reasons, but would love to hear your thoughts on why your prediction didn't prove to be correct.
Well, I think there are a combination of things that happened. First and foremost, I think Republicans were able to nationalize the election to an extent that no one could foresee. They made this election in Arkansas about President Barack Obama and his unpopularity. And that translated. We saw it at the ballot box. In terms of early voting, Republicans had a machine this time that was very effective. Absentee voting was very effective. The Ground Roots organization was very effective. And then you had the third-party groups that outspent Democratic operatives. And so I think the combination of those things, the messaging from the Republican Party, the ability to nationalize that, paid dividends for the Republican Party. And, I was wrong, and you guys were right.
Well, you were also here that day, Leon. What are your thoughts on the outcome of the election? And are you willing to accept Lamar's mea culpa?
Well, I definitely accept the fact that we did win. And again, thank you for having me on the show, and I'm appreciative of being able to sit here with this panel. You know, some of the things that Mr. Davis talked about, I do have to agree with. You know, we did win. We went out, the Republicans, we organized, and we made sure that those of us around, not only around this table, but around the state of Arkansas, understood the issues. I can say personally, from working with Governor Hutchinson during his campaign, I can say that, our efforts were not nationalized efforts. Our efforts were state and local efforts. And what we did was we went out there and we had a message of we're going to bring a change to the state. We had a message of we're going to have unity in the state. We're going to have diversity throughout the state. And I think that resonated. I do think Republicans showed up to the ballot box. I don't think Republicans showed up and they did vote. And they voted for change. We saw that not only in the governor's race, but we saw that in every constitutional race down the line. And we saw it in our state legislature. So it wasn't just a vote because everything was nationalized, in my opinion. It was a vote because people wanted change.
Wesley, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think the ground game, we haven't seen that in past elections with the Republican Party. The ground game for the Republican Party, I have to give them credit. They got out and did things, I saw in the minority communities, I saw the Republican Party doing things that you would normally associate with the Democratic Party. At my particular church, I had a congressman show up at my church, a Republican congressman. So that is usually unusual in November for the Republican Party. But also, Lamar brought up the fact that the money came into, we saw in this election, national money coming into Arkansas that we've never seen before. And that affected everything, as you talked about, across the board. It affected, but also I do believe that one of the things you said, Asa did a great job of focusing on the issues here in Arkansas that matter most to, I can truly say that the Democratic candidate for our election, Mike Ross, didn't do a good job of that. He didn't talk to us on the issues that were important. He basically mimicked what Governor Beebe, he wanted to be Governor Beebe light. That's what happened with this election. So I think those are some of the things that I can see both points. But
well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for coming here. You've been a fixture on AATN for many years on Arkansas Week, and we're honored to have you on Minority Matters. I'm glad you brought that up because Malcolm, who was our media representative on the last tape, and we're making our predictions, said that Mike Beebe's coattails were not big enough to pull Mike Beebe into the governor's office.
Mike Ross.
And to pull Mike Ross, into the governor's office. Thank you, Leon. And it seemed that prediction proved to be accurate. One of the things that I found interesting to go along with that point is every time I heard Congressman Ross talk, he referenced Mike Beebe. And I'm curious as to why, when it came to the African American community, he didn't do, Lamar, what you're alleging the Republicans did. You allege that the Republicans, at least in mainstream Arkansas, made this about a referendum against Barack Obama. But it seemed to me that Mike Ross didn't, in the community that would be most receptive to wanting to support President Obama. He didn't turn that around and say, this is about your president that looks like you and his priorities. Would that type of messaging have been effective? Because I look at the outcome of the results, and Asa Hutchinson got 10% of the African American vote, which is about twice what a statewide Republican candidate normally gets.
Well, I think what happened was that Ross has, you have this duality that you have to face, whether you're going to, what Democrats have done in the past is say, I'm going to get 95, 100% of the African American vote. So I really am not going to, someone advised him, well, you really don't have to do a whole lot of work in this area. It failed. What happens when you do that, you may still get the percentage, but you may not get the turnout, the number of people that come to the polls. The other thing that happens in that process is that he cannot, in Arkansas, you still have to run as a conservative Democrat for congressional office, for statewide offices. And if he would have started saying, going to the black community, still the reporters would have covered it and said, well, he's talking about Barack and he's mimicking Barack, and then it would have translated into losing some white voters in the rural areas. So,
do you fellas agree with that?
Well, I think one of the issues that Congressman Ross had was that, on one hand, he said he voted against the private option, and then he comes back and say he'll vote, and when I say the private option, I'm talking about Affordable Health Care Act, of course, and then he comes back and says he'll vote for it, he's for the private option. So, and I talked to many black voters across the state of Arkansas, and they all were kind of upset with the fact that he distanced himself from the president.
He did.
Mike Ross, it seemed like he made a concerted effort to distance himself from the president. I remember a time when we had the unfortunate incident of the tornadoes over in Mayflower, and Senator Pryor brought the president into the state. Mike Ross was nowhere to be found, and that resonated with a lot of black voters. And so I think the issue was, particularly with Mike Ross in the black community, there didn't seem to be that same juxtaposition.
There was no connection.
There was no connection, as it usually is, and we made a concerted effort to get Governor Hutchinson in the black community on a regular basis.
Well, I think there's some truth to those things that you're saying, but I don't think that we can get away from the point. Republicans were able to nationalize this election effectively so, and that was the key. I mean, if you look at the second congressional race, and you look at what French Hill was able to do with Pat Hayes, there are flyers out there that accuse Pat Hayes of being Barack Obama's #1 henchman. He was the mayor of North Little Rock, right? I mean, this is nationalizing the election at its best, and it was effective. So I don't even know if you get to the finer points of the private option. I think that Republicans were able to put a picture of a Democrat with President Barack Obama, and it paid dividends for them. I think Mike Ross was in a very tough position. I think he had to appeal to swing voters, and swing voters swung Republican, and that was the result.
Well, you mentioned the fact I've heard this from some of the Democratic strategists that said that during the vote that even the dog catcher would have if he said Obama, he would have won the race. So there was some truth to that, but you still had to on some races that like the one you mentioned with Pat Hayes. I still think you have to run on the issues that are important to your community and your constituents, and I think the Republicans did a better job of that. Yeah.
Well, you made the point that if Congressman Ross had outlined my strategy of really beating the drum for Obama in the black community, he would have got skewered in the mainstream media. I don't know if that's true. I've been doing this. I used to do that kind of work, that minority outreach work. I've never not once seen any reporter at an African-American focused event where there was a mainstream political candidate there.
Right.
And I think the reason is we don't necessarily promote those events to the mainstream media. We don't put out press releases.
Exactly.
And if I'm the candidate and I'm trying to be smart, I'm not necessarily going to put that on my public calendar. That way I can say whatever it is I want to say in that community without having to worry about it coming back to haunt me. But I just feel that Congressman Ross, I think your first point, he just did not have an effective strategy in the African-American community. And I think that's partially due to taking that vote for granted.
Yeah, and my point was on that is that sometimes you have advisors that advise you that that's what's going to happen, when in the reality, as you said, it's in the black community we don't see those things. We don't put out press releases. As a reporter, a lot of times when I cover events, I don't. People tell me why I didn't cover it. Well, I didn't get any information about it. So,
well, we're halfway through our time, and another race that I feel like we really need to talk about is the lieutenant governor race. John Burkhalter spent estimated nearly $3 million and did not come close to Congressman Griffin. I mean, is that just a sign, Lamar, of what you're talking about, the Republicans effectively nationalizing the election? Or, Leon, is Arkansas just a Republican state now? And it just doesn't matter who you are or how much money you have. If you're a Democrat, you just can't win.
Well, I think there's a little bit of truth in both of those statements. I do think that, I don't think that just because you're a Republican, you're going to get elected. I think the voters in Arkansas are a lot smarter than that. I think this particular time around, the Republicans just were able to organize. There was a lot of national money, but it wasn't just from the Republican side. There was a lot of national money that came in from the Democrat side as well. And so we have to keep that in mind. But I think that this particular time around, Republicans were able to ride a wave. At this particular time, Republicans now, they have an opportunity to govern, and they have to govern.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to watch how, during the session, upcoming session, you're going to see that they have to put things in place.
That's right, and they have to govern. And so some of that is the fact that there was a Republican wave, and some of that has to do with the fact that the Democrats at this particular point did not resonate their message, not only in the black community, but across the board. Because let's just be honest, there's going to be 35 to 40, maybe 45% of the people on either side is going to vote Democrat or Republican. So we're talking about those swing voters in the middle, and the Democrats just did not rally that swing vote.
It's interesting that you guys keep referencing the message, because I think if you go back and you look at track records in terms of parties, the Democratic Party has a long track record in the African American community, and you can look at the Beebe administration, look at appointments, you can look at achievements, you can look at milestones that have happened, and so that track record is there. And yet the Republican Party, there's nothing to go by. So let me start by congratulating Asa Hutchinson on his victory. But we look forward to him establishing a track record similar to the Democratic Party. I think that would help our state.
Yeah, and you mentioned a point about governing, and that's going to be important. Once you've got all those victories, now people are going to be watching and saying, and in 2 years Barack won't be in the White House, and then it's going to be really important to what is your message going to be then. The other thing is that we talk about money being king, and generally in elections, money is one of the top things that matters. But as to your point, it matters where you put that message, where it's going. I think the message in this election all went to some of the same audience. It didn't come down to us. It didn't come down to minority communities.
And if I could say one other thing, I think you asked the question, is Arkansas a Republican state? I think these things are cyclical, right? And I think if you look back to 2006, we were asking, or we were saying, the Republican Party is dead. Senator Pryor didn't even have an opponent at that point. So these things are cyclical, and I think you're right. When the president is no longer a factor, we're going to see what the message is. And the challenge will be, can you, in the 2 years, run on a history of achievement? What have you done in 2 years to propel yourself going forward?
And I guarantee you, if the Republican Party doesn't govern, 6 years from now, it'll be a different.
Well, and I agree with that. It will be a different one, but I don't think that we can overlook the fact that since 2010, the state has been turning Republican, right? So we had victories in 2010, we had more victories in 2012, we had a landslide in 2014. And so has the state completely made a flip? I'm not going to concede that at this particular point. But if the Republicans govern the way that I believe that they can, I think you'll continue to see the state remain conservative. I don't think we're going to go tip to the right so far, but I think we're going to continue to remain conservative.
Well, but I'll disagree with you, gentlemen, on one point, and that's the timeline. Because President Obama will still be president in 2016, and the Democrats will still be susceptible to that anti-Obama message and that nationalization of these elections, and that bodes well for Republicans. And the thing that Republicans have to do, in my opinion, in this first 2-year period is not kill each other, not eat their young. And, you know, it's going to be so interesting to see, because I remember in the Huckabee administration, the governor and some certain segments of the Republican Party didn't always see eye to eye. And there was some infighting. And Governor Hutchinson has come in, he's been elected on a mandate, and he feels like he was elected to lead, and I believe rightfully so. It's going to be interesting to see if these Republicans want to be led.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, you know, and kind of a segue, the private option is going to be that first test, you know, to find out if, because there's already people in the ranks that are saying, you know, if we don't want the private option, and you can't, you know, regress and take a whole government program completely out. It's not going to happen. But you got people who said, I ran on that platform, and it's going to be interesting what happens in these first few weeks and how the Hutchinson administration kind of navigates that.
That's a very good point, and I'm glad that you raised it. I think if, obviously, you know, Governor Hutchinson is very smart, very capable, and I think that he's going to do well. The challenge is going to be what I call the Tea Party element of the Republican Party and how to get those folks to play ball. If you look at Senator Dismang, I think he's capable. He's going to do a great job. He's got Senator English as one of his lieutenants. He's got Senator Sanders. I think they can do a good job bringing the mainstream Republicans together, but there's a group of 11 to 12 senators on the outside and many House members that may derail the whole thing.
And what the Democratic Party is going to do is they're going to sit back and watch and hope. You know, they're going to be hoping and praying that things you do have that infighting, you do have that calamity in the ranks, and then they can have some opportunities to join, you know, on some bills and move things that would help their constituency. So it'll be interesting.
And I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if we're going to have that infighting. And the reason I say it is because, you know, Governor Hutchinson ran on a $100 million tax cut, and Senator Dismang introduced a bill that would help with that.
This week.
And Representative Collins kind of backed off of his bill that he introduced in 2013. For tax cuts. So I think that they're all coming together and rallying around Governor Hutchinson and saying, hey, we're not going to have this infighting, and we're not going to do these things. We're going to rally behind our governor, and we're going to govern the way we should.
Well, I've been around politics too long. This is the first week.
Well, I understand.
You know, everybody's singing Kumbaya. We're getting along, but wait till 6 weeks down there.
Wait till 6 weeks down the road when they start to run out of marshmallows for the campfire, and then we'll see where things stand.
If you look at the Senate, I mean, there was already a challenge for Senate leadership, right?
Yeah,
that happened before, you know,
before anybody.
I mean, so that element is there, and I think they're going to be vocal.
It's politics.
It's politics.
It's politics.
Yeah.
Well, one of the main components of new administrations taking over are new appointments, out with the old, in with the new.
Wow.
One of the things that we bragged about when we've had you on this program before, Lamar, is that you were the first African American to serve as Deputy Chief of Staff in the governor's office. And we bragged on Governor Beebe for that. And I think it's appropriate that we also brag on Governor Hutchinson because we have sitting at our table the first African American director of the Department of Labor in Arkansas's history. So it seems that, I know the governor hasn't wrapped up his cabinet yet, but at least with regard to the cabinet, there are currently 2 African Americans, you and Darrell Bassett, who's director of the Department of Workforce Services, and I know that he's appointed 2 ladies to his cabinet that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. at Department of Career Education, Ms. Childers, and the Department of Corrections, which is very key, and I know he's at least kept the Director of Building Services and appointed also Stacey Hurst at Heritage. So it's
Franks over at
oh yes, he kept Ms. Franks at banking. So we're starting out on a sound footing, at least in the governor's office, with regard to diversity. Are any thoughts or any rumblings or anything you're hearing about the governor's office or any other offices with regard to appointments?
Well, I think he got off to a good start. What's going to be important is to watch those, those commissions and those appointments that come out every week or every 2 weeks, and seeing that as the administration moves forward, are you still seeing that same type of diversity? You're going to see him in the beginning. He's done a great job, and I think he's done a great job, as you said, of reaching out to the minority community and making great appointments. But it'll be interesting as we move forward to see if that diversity continues. I have to give Mike Huckabee credit. He did a good job when he was as a Republican governor. So also, I think he's off to a good start.
Let me congratulate Leon for your appointment. I think that's great that Governor Hutchinson has that kind of confidence in you. I know you're going to do a great job for the state of Arkansas. But I think each governor is entitled to make his own footprint.
Right.
I think the efforts from Asa Hutchinson in the African American community, from my perspective, were legitimate. I think he was well received, and I think he's off to a good start, and I think it's going to continue.
Well, we talked about the governor and his right to pick his team. There's been some rumblings lately about the AG's office and the changes that General Rutledge has made. Wesley, I believe you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, wow. That's all I can say. 30 people, that's the number. Around 30 have been fired. It's going to be interesting to see how that agency can move forward, because even when you take away that number of people, you lose some of the institutional knowledge, some of the relationships that you have to have when you make policy. So it'll be interesting to see who she brings in, and I think people are really. I mean, if you go around the Capitol, that's all the talk. It actually moved away some of the things that Hutchinson were doing. It took away the attention that he had. So it'll be interesting.
Well, and I definitely agree that that's a shocker, because, we're 3 days in, not even really 3 days in yet, the first week of the administration, and you see 30 people. But we also have to remember that every administration has cuts. Yeah. Every administration comes in and they put their own people in, and I think that what the Attorney General has done is not unlike any other administration. It may not have been as swift. Other administrations may have taken their time, but I think that she had every right to go in, remove the people that she felt that were necessary to be removed, and bring in some of her people. And I don't know if they've been replaced or not. I don't know if she just got rid of the positions. But when you hear it that swiftly, that's when it's shocking. But if you really sit back and think about it, as Solomon said, and in wisest man in the world, to the victor go the spoils.
Does she have the right? Yes. I mean, but is it good PR? Is it good politics? And let's not forget, Dennis Milligan did a similar thing right before he even took office. He dismissed, I think, 12 to 15 folks. So I mean, you got to be, at some point, you got to be concerned about Republican branding. Is this what we're going to be known for, coming in and cleaning house and doing our own thing? And I will say there are people, fine people there at the AG's office. As a former employee, I'm aware of some of them. Some of my friends were dismissed. You've got to be careful about that particular office, because it's not a political office. And when you talk about attorneys who are dismissed, who have been there for forever. So,
Well, I would have to disagree. I believe that if you work in a constitutional office, as I have, as you have, you know that it's a political office, and the people elected the general, and they elected her to trust her judgment, and she has a right to build her team. The thing that I've found very interesting is just the shock and awe that the liberal media has put out here in trying to really make this thing bigger than it is. There are 170 some odd employees over there. She fired 30, so she kept 80% of the existing staff.
That's what she did.
So I think it's very appropriate for her to bring in her team. I know
there's a difference. Not to interrupt you, there's a difference in the AG's office is set up, and you have a political staff, obviously, a public relations staff. That's fair game. Everyone already knows that. But I'm talking about attorneys who are there doing the work of the state, on behalf. And those are not typically political positions. They're there for their knowledge and their expertise. And it's unfortunate.
Well, and another thing is, and I kind of split this in the middle. I think you're right that every administration have that, but then you still have to consider the PR part of this. I mean, it brings attention to you, and that attention will follow her.
But the Democrats have had that office since Reconstruction.
Oh, yeah, they
People
have.
elected her. She ran on change. She's delivering change. I don't think the optics on that are bad. So, well, look, we're about out of time. Are there any closing thoughts as we wrap up this discussion?
Well, I'd just like to say again, thank you for having me on here. It's been a great discussion with you gentlemen. As we move forward in the state of Arkansas, whether the state remains red for Republicans, whether it turns back blue for Democrats, or whether we become purple, I think the bottom line is once the election is over, we have to govern, and we have to govern for the people of Arkansas. And I think Governor Hutchinson has already said and already shown, it's in his first couple of days, that he's here to govern, and that he's that the politics are over. It's time to go.
Lamar, I got 10 seconds for you.
I think the election is over. I think it's now time to do what's in the best interest of the state of Arkansas. I have every confidence that Governor Hutchinson will do that. I think he's got good leadership in the House and the Senate. I think they will work with him. The challenge for governing is going to be making sure the fringe party elements are all inside the big tent, and that we can do what's for the best of everyone in Arkansas.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. That's all the time we have. To the audience, once again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for watching the show. And with that, we'll see you next time. Guys, great show.